History has introduced us to many great personalities. The greatest example, no doubt, is Prophet Muhammad, who today inspires millions of people around the world. During times of difficulty, he gave us hope. Someone who followed in his footsteps and gave us light which keeps darkness away from around us was the brother of the Prophet and his successor, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He was born in Arabia in the year 601 in Mecca inside the Holy Kaaba. But Ali is not meant for Arabia or for Muslims only. Imam Ali is the most distinguished personality of Islam after Prophet Muhammad, and his entire life is in struggle for the advancement of humanity.
When we come to speak about Imam Ali, we have first of all to understand the whole Islamic system, because the Quran dominates and shapes the life of individuals. They are not superior to the Quran, but they rather are subject to and in obedience to the Quran. So we see this then, first of all, in the life of the Prophet himself, that his whole life is shaped by the Quran. So it's not a question of a ruler who can do whatever they want, but rather it is a ruler who rules under the guidance of God. Now that then gives us the metaphor for understanding Imam Ali too. So his whole characteristic, his attributes, his way of life, his way of conduct is all shaped according to the guidance of the Quran, but also according to the Sunnah of the Prophet. So from the very earliest time, when he is called by the Prophet to be his successor, his friend, and the executor of his will, he then knows that this is to be his destiny. And so Ali's whole life is an imitation of the life of the Prophet. Now the Quran tells us that those who love God will love Muhammad, and they will influence the whole of their life according to his teaching. So just as we see the Prophet being just, sincere, compassionate, truthful, fearless, so we see these characteristics as well in Imam Ali.
One of the main attributes of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayh is taqwallah. When he talks about it, it comes from his heart. He says in Nahjul Balagha, إِنَّمَا هِيَ نَفْسِي أَرُوضُهَا بِالتَّقْوَى. He says, myself, I tame it with God-worriness, with God-consciousness, with piety. This merit of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayh mirrors the Quran. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi says, as per Al-Hakim al-Naysaburi in his Al-Mustadrak ala al-Sahihain, علي مع القرآن والقرآن مع علي. Ali is with the Quran and the Quran is with Ali. That theme of taqwallah, God-worriness, God-consciousness, is found repeatedly in the Quran. Amir al-Mu'mineen pivots everything around God-worriness. You want to become a leader? Be God-conscious. You do whatever you do in this world, be God-conscious. Allah is first. That description of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayh is unique among the whole companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He is the one who really shines when it comes to taqwallah. And this is reflected on his actions and interactions. You find even when he deals with his enemies, he deals with them in a manner that is of God consciousness.
The Prophet had brought up Imam Ali from his childhood till he grew up to be a youth. In Mecca, he heard Prophet Muhammad call to Islam, and he was the first to accept the invitation. Imam Ali was quite young when the Prophet attached him with himself and called him his brother and successor. In one of his famous sermons, Imam Ali describes the attention paid to him by the Prophet and says, "From the very beginning of my life, he loved me and I loved him. He took me in his lap when I was a baby, and hence I was always with him. He often kept me embraced to his heart. When I was a baby, he fed me with his hands, often chewing hard bits for me. I followed the Prophet step by step as a baby camel follows its mother. Every year he used to stay in the Hira mountains for some time, and nobody used to be with him but I. None could then see or hear him or be near him but I. During those days, Islam was the religion of only the Prophet and his wife Khadija. I was the third of the trio. Nobody else in this world had accepted Islam."
The relationship between the Prophet himself and Imam Ali must be one of the very closest in the whole Islamic story.
We know that the Prophet used to live in the house of Imam Ali or his parents, Fatima bint Asad and Abu Talib, for a long time. And some people say that even he was there when Imam Ali was born. And then later on, Imam Ali was moved to the house of the Prophet. When Prophet moved to his own house and Imam Ali was born and he was quite young, actually the Prophet, peace be upon him, wanted him to be with him. So he took him to his own house.
It is very difficult to say which of his great qualities is the most outstanding. He walked calmly like the Prophet. However, as and when he proceeded to give a fight in battle, he walked briskly and did not turn his head to see anything else. His bodily strength was unimaginable. He usually picked up fighters whom he laid his hands on and threw them on the ground without any difficulty or effort, as if they were small children. Yet Ali was the humble and pious servant of Allah. When he stood before the Almighty God, he made his supplication with full attention. In one of his sayings, it is narrated, he says, "One group worships God to be favored with his blessings. This is the worship of the businessman. Another group worships him on account of his fear. This is the worship of the slaves. A third group worships him by way of thanksgiving. This is the worship of the free man. This is the worship of Ali."
I actually advise those viewers who can read Arabic to refer to the introduction of Sharh Nahj al-Balagha of Ibn Abil Hadid. He is a Sunni Mu'tazili scholar, of course. Arguably, they say he was the last Mu'tazili scholar because after him Mu'tazilism died out. But anyhow, in that introduction, he gives a sort of, he introduces Imam Ali in a way that one is really gratified by those qualities that he mentions. He mentions many things. He mentions about his asceticism, his worship, his bravery in the battle, his generosity, his good character, his forgiveness, and all these things. And one wonders actually which one is the most important or the most outstanding quality of Imam Ali alayhi salam.
The opposite attributes have been combined in your character, and therefore there are none like you, Ya Ali. There's only few people, because you have someone who's so brave yet so forgiving, so poor yet so generous, so knowledgeable yet so humble. And these kind of attributes are unique to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and to Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi.
When we speak about a philosophy of life, we are talking about that which shapes and drives the whole way in which I conduct my life. And so for Imam Ali, this was essentially part of his religious duty. It was part of his character and his makeup. And so his philosophy of life was one of obedience to God, implementing the guidance of the Quran, and then taking that profoundly important step of giving guidance to the community in the way in which their Islam should be lived under his direction. And so we see the first point of his philosophy is that it should be under the guidance of God, the Quran, and the Prophet. The second point is that he is always renowned for his wisdom, for his ability to reflect and to think through the consequences of every situation in which he finds himself. And so the second pillar of his philosophy of life is that of reason and balancing of the various good and bad outcomes of any decision that he makes. The third philosophy of his life is a profound understanding of the essential dignity of every human being. That every human being is invigorated, is given life by the breath of God. And therefore every single human being has a value and a dignity, no matter what faith they follow, no matter how well they follow that faith, they have an essential human dignity.
He actually worked with his own hand, sometimes for the Jewish people of Medina, to earn some money, to buy slaves, and to free them. And he says, according to historical records, he bought and freed 1,000 slaves from the earnings of his own hand. And this is amazing. I think this is very telling about the way Islam looks at slavery, that they have to be freed, and the way a person can actually be so generous.
Imam Ali was known for his piety and his relationship with the Almighty Lord. His piety was not the outcome of circumstances like that of other pious persons, who engaged themselves in worship on account of the weakness of their souls, or to escape the troubles of life, or in imitation of their ancestors. The piety of Ali was based on a firm belief. His worship was in fact a continuous effort and a campaign against mischief for the sake of human life and prosperity. He fought against all aspects of evil and wickedness. It is narrated that he has said, "Your faith should be at such a level that you should prefer truth to falsehood, even though it may cause you loss and falsehood may bring you gain." Therefore, according to Ali, the essence of piety is to sacrifice one's life for the sake of truth and justice.
Everyone who becomes a caliph becomes recognized. However, the caliphate itself was recognized through Ali. Yani it's the vice versa. Anyone who becomes a Khalifa, then his name becomes known. You take a look at, for example, some of the Abbasids, some of the Umayyads, they had siblings who did not become caliphs. It's the ones who became caliphs that became recognized. But when Ali ibn Abi Talib, Caliphate itself was recognized through him. He did not need to be recognized through the Khilafah. To Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Khilafah is establishing Hukm Allah, the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khilafah is establishing justice. Therefore, Khilafah is a means. It is not the goal. Khilafah is a means to establish justice, to establish the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, he says, this Khilafah of yours, to me, is worthless. As he mentions in Shiqshaqiyya.
The caliphate, he has explained himself what it meant to him, to take rights of the people, to establish justice, to not let the rich who had became rich unduly without having the right to become rich, to take from them and give to the poor who had become poor unduly. That was the most important thing for him. And this is one of the criticisms that they raise against him, and many of the battles or grudges that he actually brought upon himself were because of this quality of justice and looking after the poor. He said, it's very famous that he said that this caliphate of yours is less than the splash of the sneeze of a goat for me, unless if I can establish justice with it. That's what he meant.
We know that one of the complaints that Ali made was that the first two caliphs had changed elements of the teaching of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. And he refused to accept authority within the community if it meant that he would accept and implement the errors of the first two caliphs. We know as well that Imam Ali was possessed of a great prudence, of a great concern for the people, because if he had claimed his rights from the beginning, there would have been civil war, there would have been bloodshed. So he prudently withdraws from any kind of conflict in order that the people may be spared. And we see this message repeated again and again.
Imam Ali actually was the center of this test of the Ummah. First of all, he was tested very, very severely for his patience, for his behavior. And secondly, the Ummah was tested by him or because of him. Because he was always on the side of Haqq. There's no doubt about it. No one had any speck of doubt about that. And now that history goes back, in the hindsight, everyone can realize that he was on the right, on Haqq.
Imam Ali was not very keen to become a caliph. He had assisted the previous caliphs as and when they were faced with any difficulty. And whenever the Islamic Caliphate was confronted with a problem, Ali solved it. After the death of Uthman, the people pledged their allegiance to him and wanted him to lead them. But Imam Ali knew very well that if he accepted the request of the people and assumed the responsibility of the Caliphate, they would not tolerate the manner in which he would run the administration and would not obey his orders.
We know as well that Ali was not somebody who pointed toward himself. So it's not as though he was seeking aggrandizement for himself, but rather he is someone who is constantly pointing toward God and his messenger. And we see him acting as the messenger, the servant of the Prophet on many occasions. He is not afraid to live a life of service to one who is the messenger of God. In this role of service, we see his compassion and his concern, especially for those who are poor and needy within the society. So we see the Prophet using him to distribute food to those who are in need, to distribute justice and guidance to people. He is the messenger who goes out from the messenger of God. Now, he does this in a way which does not belittle people. We see him very often actually reaching out to the poor and lowly within society and elevating them, lifting them up, giving them that essential human dignity. So when we see the famous saying of Imam Ali that every human being is either your brother in faith or your brother in humanity, that is lived out in the way in which he conducts himself in his interactions with people.
When he came to power, of course, he said that I will not differentiate between Arab and Ajam, between Mawali and Quraysh. Everyone is equal. And and we know this was completely in contrast with the policy of Muawiyah. He was actually preferring people over others, giving them favors, asking favors from them. Some of the people came to him in Medina and said, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, this is not the way the government works. You cannot suddenly abolish all these prerogatives that your predecessors have given to Arabs, have given to Quraysh. And you have to observe that. And also, these ashraf, the honorable people, you have to call them, you have to give them something so that they support you, their tribe support you. He said that I'm not going to seek victory by oppression and injustice. I'm not the person to seek nasr with jawr. I'm not doing that. I swear, if it was my own money, I would have given them equally. Now, it is not my money, it's money of Baytul Mal. How can I differentiate between them? One can imagine how the situation would have become. I mean, the people who had all those sort of power leverages in the society were going to lose it. Some people say, why, for example, at the time of the third caliph, everything was quiet, things were going nicely. Of course, it's not the case, because after all, otherwise their companions would have come to criticize and eventually killing the third caliph. But some say it was nice before, but when Imam Ali came, all battles, fighting started. Yeah, it's very clear why. He wanted to bring back the standards of the Prophet, the standards of Islam, not letting Jahiliyyah to creeping back into Muslim society. And this was very important. And this was what he set as his heritage. It's not important whether he ruled for 5 years or 50 years. What he left as his heritage is very important. And his heritage is, of course, justice, equality, going according to haqq, and this is the most important thing.
According to him, the real duty of the governors of the provinces and other officials was that they should protect these rights and should not allow them to be infringed upon. Imam Ali safeguarded the rights of the people so carefully that it is almost impossible to find any sermon, speech, or statement of his in which he may not have mentioned these rights. Famously, George Jordak says in his famous book, Ali, the Voice of Human Justice, Ali formulated such firm rules and presented such solid views for the rights of human beings, that the welfare of the human society, that their roots penetrate into the depth of the earth and their branches extend upon the heavens.
Another important highlight of Imam Ali salamullahi alayh is his justice. His justice is indeed commendable, which is again resonating from his taqwallah. The way he deals with people on the markets, in the streets, and that's what prompted a Christian Lebanese writer by the name of George Jordak to write a book about Imam Ali alayhi salam, calling it صوت العدالة الإنسانية, or the voice of human justice. This is a view of a Christian man, not a Muslim man, who studied the life of Imam Ali alayhi salam and his words in Nahjul Balagha, and he was resonating with them. He was interacting with them as if they are lively, as if he sees Imam Ali in front of him speaking. The way you see George Jordak writing the book, he feels the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayhi. Imam Ali's justice indeed is unique. When he lost his armor in one of the battles, and a man picked it up who was a Christian man, he found him in Kufa selling the armor. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam approaches him and says, "This is my armor." He said, "No, it is mine. I am selling it. If you want, you buy it." They go to the judge, Shuraih al-Qadi. When they enter, Shuraih calls Imam Ali Salamullahi alayhi, "Assalamu alayka ya Aba al-Hasan." Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "No, don't call me by my titles. Call me Ya Ali." He says, "Why not?" He says, "Because my opponent will think that you already know me, we have connections, and therefore you're gonna judge to my side. They're gonna be biased. Call me Ya Ali. When you have people coming to you, don't call them by their titles." He says, "Okay, what do you want? What's the matter?" They present him with the case. Because the armor at the time was in the hand of the Christian man, Shuraih says, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, or Ya Ali, do you have a proof that it belongs to you? Do you have any witnesses?" And Imam Ali says, "No, I don't." He says, "Well, then the armor belongs to him." And he rules against Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali tells Shuraih, "Well done. This is the right judgment." They go out of the courthouse. The Christian man asks Imam Ali, "Are you not Ali ibn Abi Talib?" He says, "Yes." "Are you not Amir al-Mu'mineen?" He says, "Yes." Aren't you the one who appointed Shuraih as a judge?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Then he just ruled against you." He says, "But this is the ruling of truth. I don't have any witnesses. And it was under your hand, under your control. Therefore it belongs to you." The man says, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa annaka bilhaq wasiyyu Rasulillah." He says, "I bear witness that you are the right successor to Rasulullah." And he becomes a Muslim. He says, "I have never seen this kind of character, but in the prophets. The prophets would behave like this. And since you are not a prophet, then you must be a true successor to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And he says, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're right. This is your armor." He'll take it back. Imam Ali at that point says, "You can keep it," and goes on. This kind of mesmerizing justice of Imam Ali is unique, second only to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes, it's very famous that Imam Ali alayhi salam was going to the houses of some of those widows whose husbands were killed in battle against him. They were actually fighting against Imam Ali in the battle, especially in the Battle of Nahrawan. And some of the women had become widowed. There's this very interesting story that he went to the house of a widow woman who helped her to take something for her. And she was swearing at Ali that Ali did this, Ali did that, and he didn't mention that I am Ali. And he was helping her and playing with her children. I mean, these are very humane aspects of a person. The very idea that he did not keep any money for himself, whatever he earned, not from Baytul Mal, whatever he earned from his own struggle or efforts, his own efforts, he just spent it for the poor. He did not keep anything for himself.
Ali has no peer in history in the matter of forgiveness and chivalry, and there are countless incidents which throw light on these qualities of his. It is said in this connection that on the occasion of a battle, he gave the following instructions to his soldiers: don't kill an enemy who runs away. Don't withhold assistance from one who is helpless and wounded. Don't strip anyone. Don't take the property of anyone by force.
Looking at the ethics of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in war, it demonstrates how intriguing it is that he is a man of peace, not a man of violence. But when it comes to combat, he is the hero of the battles.
In the Battle of Basra, for example, in Battle of Jamal, Marwan ibn Hakam, who was his bitterest enemy, was, of course, captured, and he just forgave him and let him go. In that very battle, he says that we know the way he treated al-Mu'minin Aisha after he had come out fighting against him, and he actually returned her to Medina with all respect, with women disguising themselves as men so that the respect of the wife of the Prophet is not somehow dented.
One of his fierce enemies, a man by the name of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, who became a Khawarij, one of the Khawarij, the Kharijites. And Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam scolds Al-Mughira, and he says, you are one of the people who attacked the house of my mother Fatima. This Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah builds a minaret in his house, and he starts cursing and talking negatively about Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayh during the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayh. Imam Ali in Masjid al-Kufa, and Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah goes on his minaret in his house, and he starts talking negatively, in a negative way, against Imam Ali salamullahi alayh. The news reaches Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, as long as he is in his house, not harming anyone, he has the right. This is what we call today the freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Where do we find such a leader who deals in such manners with his enemies, with the people who curse him, right in front of him?
And of course he was following the etiquette of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No destruction, no burning, no mass murder, no usage of unethical means for victory. And this is very famous, that in the Battle of Siffin, when he first encountered Muawiyah and his army, they had taken the river, and they had shot the water to the army of Imam Ali. And Imam Ali said, okay, it's either death or we go and take the river. And because they had no other choice, they attacked, and the army of Muawiyah retreated and went back, and the water was taken by Imam Ali alayhi salam, and they became absolutely without any water, the other army. Now, his commander said, Ya Ali, now we have the main weapon, water. We close it to them, we don't allow them, we don't need to fight them. We don't need to use any sword or arrow. We just keep them for a couple of days like that, and they all die, or go back. Imam Ali said, this is not my method. I'm not going to use their method. I use the sword rather than thirst. And the sword is enough for us, for victory. So this means that he is a very, very ethical man, even in battle, even with the enemies, even not retaliating what they did to him.
Imam Ali formulated such firm rules and presented such solid views for the rights of the human beings and the welfare of the human society. The 7th century letter of Ali ibn Abi Talib to Malik al-Ashtar was sent by the Islamic leader Ali to his governor Malik, a loyal supporter who served as the governor of Egypt. The letter advised Malik al-Ashtar how to treat the people of Egypt justly. It has come to be seen by some as a model of just Islamic governance.
التقرير يقول أن الإمام علي أوصى مالك الأشتر بوصاياه. هذا ملخص. فيا دول العالم اتبعوا هذه الوصايا. وأن الإمام علي عليه السلام لم يتكلم فقط، هناك الكثير من الذين يتكلمون اعملوا كذا، اعملوا كذا، احترموا كذا. الإمام علي طبقها على نفسه. يعني أول ما بويع الإمام علي عليه السلام قال هذا ثوبي وهذا الحمار عندي، إذا رأيتم غير ثوبي وغير هذا الحمار فأوصفوني بالخيانة. هاي الكلمة أنا آسف أن أقولها، ولكن للتاريخ للتثبيت ذلك. أوصفوني بالخيانة إذا وجدتم غير هذا الثوب وغير هذا الحمار. فملخص التقرير يقول أن الإمام علي عليه السلام أوصى مالك الأشتر بأن يختار الحكام الصالحين، بأن يتواضع، بأن يحارب الفساد، بأن لا يكون له طمع، بأن لا يأكل من مال المسلمين، بأن يخدم المسلمين وغير المسلمين كذلك. كل رعايا تلك الدولة يعاملهم بالمساواة.
This important letter to Malik al-Astar is reported to have been written in the year 658. Now, it's important then to think, first of all, this is 2 years after the assassination of the Caliph Uthman. This was almost certainly carried out by people from Egypt who were coming to him to complain at the nepotism, at the things that had gone wrong during his caliphate. Therefore, we have to assume that Egypt, the people of Egypt at this time, are aggrieved. They feel themselves to have been badly treated. The second thing to remember is that in 658, the vast majority of the people of Egypt haven't yet converted to Islam. They're under Islamic rule, but the majority of them are still Christians. We don't have the exact figure, but clearly that must have been the case. Therefore, the community of Egypt shapes the task that Malik is to undertake as the governor there. And it's into that context, then, that this letter from Imam Ali is written. And the first thing he says to him is that your very life becomes a beacon in this community. The way that you conduct yourself will be the face of Islam in this community. And therefore, you are to have that mind in you all the time. Secondly, he calls him to the fundamental principle of justice, that you should do justice in that society to everyone who is there equally. And he uses the famous aphorism that you are to treat the people as though they are either your brother in religion or your brother in humanity.
هذا القول الذي قال وطبقه فعليا عندما جاء كان يمشي في أحد الأسواق وجد أحدهم يستجدي في الطريق وهو كبير في العمر. قال من هذا ولماذا يجلس هنا ليستجدي؟ قالوا يا سيدنا لا تهتم به. قال كيف لا أهتم؟ هذا إنسان يستجدي يمد يده. قالوا إنه مسيحي. قال عجيب، وإذا كان مسيحي خذوه واعطوه من بيت المال. هذا هو السوشيال سيكوريتي، هو هذا الضمان الاجتماعي. من ذلك الزمان أول من طبق الضمان الاجتماعي السوشيال سيكوريتي هو الإمام علي. من ذلك الزمان مسيحي اعطوه من بيت المال، اعطوه راتبا حتى يعيش عيشة محترمة.
He then goes through in detail about the kind of people that Malik should take as his counselors, as his judges, and as the generals of his army. So as his counselors, first of all, you are to take counsel only from those people who are of upright life and who have never been known to give that counsel to a tyrant. His second instruction is to set up a judiciary, to set up those who are deeply imbibing the wisdom of the Quran, but also who have a deep sense of justice. Now, justice is not something that wears labels. There's no such thing as Muslim justice or Christian justice or secular justice. Justice is something which is open and accessible to human reason. So this is a dominant theme as well for Imam Ali. You are to be a reasonable, rational leader of the people. And then finally, there are only on a couple of occasions during the whole of this letter to Malik when Imam Ali speaks about punishment. And this is one occasion. If a judge is seen to be corrupt, then you are to punish him without hesitation, and that punishment is to take place in public so that everybody can see that nobody is above the law and corruption will never be tolerated. And then he gives guidance about those who are to serve in the army. Now, the army is there in order to protect all the people. And it is to be led by wise officers who not only are skilled in the ways of warfare, but who have great compassion and concern for their soldiers, for the men who fight with them. So there is no sense here in which the ordinary foot soldier is expendable in the battle. Rather, you are to treat each and every one of those soldiers as though they were the most precious thing, as though they were your own son going into the field of battle. Because only if the officers have that degree of concern for their men will you have a truly just army system. The Imam says to Malik that you are to have an overriding concern, and that concern will be for the poor people within that society. You are to reach out to the poor, you are to raise them up, you are to see that they are fed and that they are properly cared for, and then the people will love you and they will come to respect you and to trust you.
صدر بموافقة الدول كافة، وهذا نصر كبير لنا وللإمام علي وللإسلام وللشيعة بصورة خاصة. هذا لا يمكن تغييره. صدر في 169 صفحة به توصيات لدول العالم وإلى الدول العربية وإلى الدول الإسلامية باتباع وصايا الإمام علي عليه السلام.
The justice of Ali is one that is always admired by all walks of life. The life of the Commander of Faithful is based purely on the teachings of Islam and on the principles of justice and humanity. It's said that Imam Ali was killed because of his excessive emphasis on practicing of and adhering to justice. Justice is the master of virtues and the cause to peace, and Ali embodied this in his life.
Al-Allama al-Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar has a section dedicated to why people hated Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He gives many reasons. For the sake of time, we'll touch upon two of them. The first one of them is the Battle of Badr. فأودع في قلوبهم أحقادا بدرية وحنينية وغيرهن. In Dua al-Nudbah, he left in their hearts, the hearts of the mushrikeen, the heart of the enemies, ahqad, hatred against him, from the time of Badr, Hunayn, and other battles as well. Abdullah ibn Umar tells Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Ya Ali, inna badran lam tadhar lakum sadiqa. He says, Ali, the battle of Badr did not leave you with any friends. Imam Ali corrected him. He said, inna badran lam tadhar lana madhiqa. Madhiq is laban al-makhshush, meaning false friends. Even false friends were not left with us. Why? 70 of the mushrikeen were killed in Badr. 70 of the heads of them. 35 of those were killed by the sword of Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayh. And Imam Ali writes in Nahj al-Balagha to Muawiyah in one of the letters, he says, the sword with which I killed your brother and your uncle and your grandfather is still in my hand, ready to fight you if you initiate war against me. Do you think Muawiyah will forgive that? He will forget that? If Yazid ibn Muawiyah, who was not even present, who was not even born at the time of Badr, if he himself says, Layta ashyakhi bi Badrin shahidu, I wish my forefathers in Badr were here to see how I sought the revenge of the battle. Even though they killed Al-Hamza in Uhud, يعني they got some of their revenge in Uhud when they killed Hamza and Hind did whatever she did with his body. But that they still did not consider as enough of a revenge. Killing Imam Hussain and doing whatever he did to him by a man who was not even present, he was not even born. So what do you think Muawiyah feels like because of Badr? What do you think Abu Sufyan feels like because of Badr? So Abdullah ibn Umar says to Imam Ali that Badr did not leave you with any friends. The wounds that you kept in people's hearts from killing their heads of Quraysh, Imam Ali says not even false friends were left to us. So it's the people whom were killed by Imam Ali, and therefore the families of those people had this hatred against Imam Ali. But Imam Ali was defending Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa defending Islam, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though Imam Ali knew that him killing the mushrikeen, fighting against those people who are attacking the religion of Islam, who are violating peace, knew that this is going to result in the hatred against him and his family, and the attack against his wife, and the killing of his own son in his house, Al-Muhsin salamullahi alayh, yet the word of Allah is greater. Dhikrullah akbar. And he would fight for the dhikr of Allah, for the word of Allah, under the service of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayh.
It's an unfortunate fact of life that not everybody is as good as they ought to be. Not everybody is as obedient to the guidance of God as they ought to be. If you have given over your life to bad acts, to wicked acts, to doing evil upon the earth, then the last thing that you want is to come in contact with pure goodness, with uprightness, with justice, and with truth. These were the characteristics that people saw in the life of Imam Ali. Now, if somebody's life is given over to a completely different set of values, then they are not going to like the goodness that they see in the Prophet. I think of it this way, that if you go out of a dark house on a very bright sunny day, the sun can be so bright that it hurts. It almost blinds you, and you want to close your eyes to shield your eyes from the light. This is how it is when a wicked person comes into the presence of someone who radiates goodness and truth and justice. Therefore, it hurts them. Therefore, one of the things that they do is that they curse the good, they curse the light, they curse the justice, because that will reveal their weakness, their wickedness before the world. So Imam Ali is a bit like a searchlight, a burning bright sun that casts light into the lives of those that he encounters. And when they see that, if they have given their lives over to wickedness, then they will curse him, then they will reject him, then they will fight against him, because they do not want to be shown up for what they are.
The second point why people disliked Imam Ali alayhi salam is because of his adalah, his justice. Some people started to get paid extra money during the time of the second Khalifa. When the third Khalifa came, Bani Umayyah started to have a lot of money. With money comes power. Now comes Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, takes this money away from them. He's taking this power away from them. People don't like that. An example that we can give in modern contemporary world today, imagine if a leader of a prominent country, developed country, comes and says we are going to seize all the powers away from corporations. What do you think these corporations are going to do in reaction? Corporations that are worth billions of dollars. They will invest a lot of money in attacks against this individual. So Imam Ali was fair, was just. And because of his justice, people could not bear that justice. One of the companions he had, Masqala, runs to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And Imam Ali writes in Nahj al-Balagha, or mentions in Nahj al-Balagha, it is mentioned. He says, Tabban li Masqala. He says, woe upon Masqala. He did not run from injustice. And he ran away to Muawiyah. He says, nor was he seeking justice. But in fact, he could not bear with the justice of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And all those people, in a different saying, he says, those who leave me and go to Muawiyah, they're not running away from injustice, nor are they seeking justice. They can't bear with my justice. This is how I deal with people. It's God consciousness, God worthiness. When Imam Ali alayhi salam became the Khalifa, some of the people advised him. They said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Talha wants some power. Zubair, he likes some power. Muawiyah wants to remain in Sham as a Khalif, as a governor, Wali. Give some power to Talha, Zubair, and this way you gain them on your side. Keep Muawiyah in Sham for some time as a wali, as a governor, until your khilafah strengthens, until everything solidifies. Once you have the strength, then kick them all out. Get rid of them all. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, then what will I answer Allah on the day of judgment? If one of these people oppress one of the Muslims or one of the people who's their subject, who's going to be responsible? He says, I will never do that. There's no compromise. And therefore, he does not give power to Talha and Zubair. And he writes a letter to Muawiyah saying that you need to leave your position and I'm going to send someone to take over from you. Muawiyah obviously refuses, and that's what initiates a battle later on known as that Battle of Siffin. What's important to know here is the adala of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. An Egyptian writer by the name of Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqqad. He writes a book called The Genius of Imam Ali, Abqariyatul Imam Ali alayhi salam. In it, he writes this quote that Muawiyah is not smarter than I am, but he lies and he cheats. He writes this quote. He says, this is what makes Imam Ali unique. Because he does not lie, he does not cheat, he's a fair man, he's a man of justice. I call it a man of taqwa Allah. He is God conscious. And this is what really tells us how great Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is. But the reason for people hating him are such that they could not live with the justice of Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi.